Welcome back to another episode of the Steel Curtain Podcast. I am your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of SteelCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is Steel Curtain contributor and copy editor Shayne Kubas to talk about the Steelers head coach candidates. Shayne, I think we got this list narrowed down. We're going to talk about what the Steelers historically look for at the position, who we think it's the ultimate candidate is going to be, what we would have done, maybe as opposed to what the Steelers might do here. And we're going to break down all the coaching changes over the NFL. 10 job openings, Shayne. Like, you don't see this cycle very often, especially one that includes people like Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh and Sean McDermott losing their jobs.
Yeah, it's been a wild coaching carousel this season for sure so far. It's one that I think is kind of historic in a lot of ways, especially the amount of head coaches who, by all accounts, are relatively successful even this past season. I know Harbaugh, you missed the playoffs. You have a lot of injuries, a lot of issues with that. But, like, he obviously had a ton of time with the Ravens, 18 years, very close to Tomlin's 19 years. Steelers make the playoffs. And obviously, Tomlin steps down. It's a little bit different situation. But the McDermott of it all is the one that I think is most interesting here. I definitely have some takes on that. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit and what his situation might be. But it's certainly been a lot.
Yeah, Shayne, and this is the focus of our show today. Stick with us throughout all of it because, again, this might be the most important decision the Steelers have made since hiring Mike Tomlin.
Probably.
This is a big franchise-altering move, potentially. You got to get it right, and if you don't, you could be back at square one a few years from now. That's not the way the Steelers like to do business.
Nope.
We know that, but sometimes you don't have a choice, and so big deal coming up for the Pittsburgh Steelers here. We expect that decision to be made pretty soon. I mean, in the coming weeks at the very latest, Shayne, we got the NFL offseason coming up. We got days after the Super Bowl. We have the East-West Shrine game. We've got the Senior Bowl. Stuff is starting to happen already. And so these decisions are going to be made soon. But let's start right here in Pittsburgh first with some non-coach related news. Andy Weidl, Shayne, is interviewing with the Atlanta Falcons for their GM position. Don't leave us.
Yeah,
this is the one. Like, I honestly, especially now with Tomlin gone, with Cameron Hayward maybe ready to hang it up soon, with TJ Watt past his prime, I would argue, Shayne, I'd make a really strong case that Andy Weidl is the single most valuable member of this organization, whether it's coach, front office member, or player. Take your pick. I think that he's the most valuable one because one thing that has been working right for the Pittsburgh Steelers over the last 3 seasons is their drafting. Have they been perfect? No. Broderick Jones, Fowtown has had his up and downs, but I think the drafting has been the best thing they've been doing. It's been better than the trades. It's been better than the free agent moves, which, by the way, Omar Khan controls. Andy Weidl constructs the draft board. There's a couple articles by Mike DeFabo of The Athletic who confirms that. I don't want to lose Andy Weidl. This is the one guy in the organization you really don't want to lose if you're the Steelers.
Yeah, because, again, he's been a big help for helping them find targets in the mid rounds, I think, that fit what they're looking for and fit what the defense needs, especially, I would say, defensively, like I said. You know, the offensive pieces have been hit or miss, but the offensive linemen outside of Jones, and you could argue, again, Fatanu's played 1 year, only missed most of his rookie year. That's something we still have to watch play out. But outside of Broderick Jones, like, I don't really have a problem with most of the draft picks on offense since he's joined the team. And I think that's really important because we're about to go into a whole different era of offensive football and probably defensive football for this team. And having someone who has his background with the Eagles and other places, I think is going to be really important to let Khan focus on the things that he's best at, which is more of the contracts and trades and stuff like that.
Yeah, Shayne, and I would go as far to say even some of the draft picks the Steelers have made are hardly the fault of the front office or Andy Weidl because they just haven't been able to see the field. And maybe those guys are not very good. We'll find out. But this is a guy that I don't want to lose. And I said back in 2022, Shayne, when the Steelers hired Khan and Weidl, I think within a week of each other back in, I think it was May of 2022, I said I would have preferred Weidl get the GM job and Khan get the assistant GM job. What scares me a little bit, Shayne, and I know we've had this conversation before, is that Khan was around Kevin Colbert for so long and around Mike Tomlin for so long. Is he going to have that groupthink mentality where he's got to operate the same way and it's all about the here and now? It's not about building for the future. Like, that concerns me a little bit. I don't want to get down this rabbit hole right now because I want to talk about coaching, But it is significant to note that Andy Weidl has an interview for a GM job. If he doesn't get one this year, it just feels like we're trending in the next year or two. He's going to be somebody's GM.
It's coming, I think. Yeah, like he's done enough as the assistant GM for the Steelers, and I think people, like you said, know what his job is for us and understand what he's been able to do building the draft board and everything like that. And his past record with the Eagles, like it just feels like that's coming. I don't necessarily think it's going to be this year. I have a feeling that there's going to be a different pick there with the Falcons GM, especially with Matt Ryan kind of being the ultimate decision maker there. It seems like, maybe certain guys are not going to be super interested in that job depending on how much freedom they're actually going to have. But I do think, again, if it's not this year, maybe next year is probably the best we could hope for.
All right, Shayne, let's talk about some of the coaching news around the NFL. The biggest piece of news is John Harbaugh. After leaving the Baltimore Ravens, being relieved of his duties there, he has officially signed with the New York Giants for their head coaching position, Shayne. And I thought it was interesting because less than a week afterwards, roughly a week afterwards, the Buffalo Bills job came open because Sean McDermott left. Josh Allen, he's one of one. That's pretty enticing situation. But we just saw a disastrous press conference from Brandon Beane and the Bills owner. Like, it's just a mess over there. And maybe he wouldn't have taken that job anyway. Obviously, you'd love to work with Josh Allen. You're going to be competitive every year. But Harbaugh's very satisfied with his role in New York now. Gets to go with Jackson Darts, some young, talented pieces on defense there, some building blocks, Malik Neighbors. He is out of the Steelers' hands in terms of they're only going to have to see this guy once every 4 years, really, on the calendar. What do you make of the Giants' decision to hire Harbaugh? Was he the best candidate out there in the cycle, in your opinion, or are we kind of just going off of his past reputation here?
Yeah, I certainly don't think he was the best candidate in the cycle. I think that he fits firmly in the category of like floor raiser, culture builder, theoretically at least. But then you do think about some of the stories that have come out over the years with him in Baltimore, where sometimes the players were not exactly big fans of him, or they felt like he wasn't, leading them properly. And I don't want to speak on that too much. I wasn't in that building, but I do wonder what the upside is with this. And I guess if you're a Giants fan and if you're the Giants themselves, they desperately need something to settle this organization down. And I think that in that way, it makes a lot of sense. But I do think that ultimately, if they want to get from not just being bad, but to being great, I think he might stop at getting them good. And if that's good enough for them for the next, 5 years or however long his deal is, then that's fine. But I do wonder if you're going to kind of top out at just being a good team under Harbaugh and not a great one.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought as well, too, when he signed. I know that the national media is all gung-ho about this move and talking about how it's just an enormous win for the Giants, and maybe it is. I think he absolutely is that floor-raising head coach. Ceiling raiser, I think that's a different story. We'll see what he ends up doing over there, but I'm sure he'll get a big window of opportunity. Andy Reid gave him the go-ahead, the glowing endorsement, say, hey, sometimes change is good.
Yeah.
I mean, surprisingly, Shayne, he's close to like 10 years older than Andy Reid was when he took the Kansas City job. And that's kind of hard to believe. But
he's
63 years old.
63, 64. Yeah. So this is probably, if I had to guess, his last stop in the NFL, unless it's a quick stop, which I highly doubt. I don't think that they would cut bait on him very quickly. But the more interesting part of this one for me, honestly, is the situation with Joe Shayne. And the fact that it felt like the reason why the deal was done but not done for like a minute there was figuring out, okay, what's the structure? And it sounds like it's basically Harbaugh and everyone else. That seems to be the structure. And I think personally, if I'm the Giants, I would have just canned Shayne as well and just moved on entirely from him. But if they're not going to do that, I guess making Harbaugh the ultimate authority is maybe better. I really don't know.
And Shayne, I mean, I want to butt in here because when has this ever worked out for a team? When do you give full dictatorship control over an organization? Does this work out? It didn't work out with Bill O'Brien in Houston. It did not work out with Bill Belichick in New England. Once you have, I think my personal thought here, head coach should be the head coach. Your GM should be your GM.
Yeah.
There's a separate job going on and you're running $1 billion business. You can't afford to try to control everything. And I understand wanting to be involved in that process, but that's just my 2 cents. And not that Joe Shayne is anything special. We could talk about him not maybe deserving of his job these days. But yeah, I mean, this is where we are with Harbaugh right now. And the one other thing that I will say, Shayne, on this topic real quick, this might not be the fix that the Giants are looking for. I mean, we literally saw a situation last year where everybody was like, oh, Pete Carroll's going to go and be a floor raiser for the Las Vegas Raiders. We knew the Raiders weren't good, just like we know the Giants aren't good, although the Giants show a lot more promise. But we could see a similar situation. It's like, this didn't go as planned because Carroll was one and done in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it turns out the floor was literally the floor at the first pick. So,
and ironically, Carroll and Harbaugh have nearly like identical win percentages, playoff records. Like they're kind of spitting images of each other in that sense. Another one, Shayne, another AFC North head coach leaving, Kevin Stefanski, former 2-time coach of the year, to join the Atlanta Falcons. I like Stefanski as a coach. I think he's a solid coach. I think his time did run its course in Cleveland, but he will get a chance to prove himself. He's got some good skill players to work with now in Atlanta.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting fit because assuming either Michael Penix can actually get back healthy and look good, or they can find a new quarterback beyond him quickly, I think that this has a chance to work. And this is actually, and I do some other stuff outside of here, including a betting show that I do with some friends. I did bet that Stefanski would be this team's head coach. It just kind of made sense, especially once Matt Ryan came in. I felt like he would like a veteran coach that's an offensive mind, and that just made a lot of sense. But I do think this can work out. I do just wonder, though, if maybe the 2-time coach of the year thing is getting Stefanski more credit than maybe he deserves at this particular moment in time.
Yeah.
But again, I think that this one has some amount of upside opposed to like a Harbaugh, where if Stefanski gets a chance to run his offense, and I mean, you have the pieces. It's just unfortunately the same problem you had with Cleveland, where at least he has the pieces. In Atlanta is the quarterback. Like, who's going to be that guy?
Agreed. Let's talk about Jeff Hafley, former Steelers head coach candidate, the Packers defensive coordinator, former Packers defensive coordinator, signing as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Shayne, you are the copy editor for Fin Fanatic, our fan-sided Dolphins site. What do you make of that signing? And did Steelers miss out on the opportunity with Hafley?
I don't think so personally. I don't think he's a bad candidate. I don't think this is necessarily a bad hire. It makes a lot of sense structurally because they did bring in John Eric Sullivan, one of the Packers execs, to be their new GM. So there's continuity there. I think that there's an element of that is positive for this team because they were under Chris Greer for a long time, and he just kind of didn't get it done in a lot of ways through different regimes as head coaches. So I don't want to say that it's not going to work out, but I do think with Hafley, his defenses were good, but we saw what happened when Parsons goes down. And losing Parsons is obviously a huge, thing for Green Bay last year, but he didn't have him before that, and the defense still played better, in 2024 than the version we saw without Parsons in 2025. So I do wonder, how much of the scheme is he going to bring that's going to actually elevate the Dolphins roster? And then really, is he more than kind of just another players coach type of guy? Because that's what I've heard a lot about with him, is that the players love him. But how much does that ultimately matter? Because the players really liked McDaniel for the most part. That didn't seem to be the problem. It's just, can he actually do enough on the defensive side of the ball to kind of get this team where they want to go?
All right, Shayne, in the final head coaching job that we know of so far, Robert Saleh finalizing a deal to become the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. He's got number 1 overall pick from 2025, Cam Ward over there. And so maybe that was enticing for him. He had some success, at least defensively, with the Jets. Couldn't take them anywhere. But this is another candidate I don't think the Steelers seriously would have considered, but at least was somewhere on their radar.
He would fit the mold to some level, so he's a guy that may have eventually gotten an interview if he was available. But I think for the Titans, this is just my takeaway is at least it's not Matt Nagy, I guess, which is what a lot of people expected. No offense to him, but I don't know if I want that retread. But Saleh's an interesting guy because I think in general, I would say that he's a good coach, and I think he was a relatively effective coach for the Jets. It's just that it's the Jets. And how much do we weigh what he was able to not accomplish versus what he was, which was make that defense so good? if he can do something similar for the Titans defense and the offensive side of the ball is less of an issue than it was with the Jets, which it will be almost no matter what, considering what the offense looked like for the Jets while he was there. I do think there's a chance that he bounces back and actually makes this work this time. I really think there's a chance that happens here.
All right. You are tuned into the Still Curtain podcast, where Steelers fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up stillcurtain.com, powered by the passionate fans at Fansided. We are dropping new articles every single day, stillcurtain.com. Go check it out, covering the coaching cycle from every single angle, giving our thoughts on who we think should be the next head coach and who we believe will be the next head coach. And we're going to talk about that next. So stay with us here. Steelers coaching search. First time in nearly 2 decades, Shayne, and it is starting to dwindle down. 4 of the 10 head coaching vacancies have been filled, and so some of those names are off the list. We've seen who's gotten second interviews with the Steelers. We can see the betting odds of who's going to be the Steelers' favorite. Here's some rumblings about who it might be. We're going to talk about that now, but let's talk about Mike McCarthy here for a second, because a late addition to the head coach race. This is just wild in a sense. I get where the buzz comes from here. And my personal thought, Shayne, is that McCarthy is a Yinzer by nature, a Pittsburgher. The Steelers are giving him the due diligence to sit down with this interview, and maybe this is a agent ploy as well. Tom Pelissero is close to Mike McCarthy, and he was obviously tweeting about Mike McCarthy and the connection and how he kind of backed out of the Titans job because his focus is on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if I would read as heavily into that as the media is making it out to be right now. That's what I will say about this. But McCarthy, to respect to him, I mean, I think he's a solid offensive-minded coach. The problem is he's been doing this for a long time now. He would be one of the oldest coaches in the NFL, which by nature really isn't the direction that the Steelers have wanted to go with these types of hires. He has not brought a lot of playoff success in recent years, just the one playoff win with the Dallas Cowboys over a 5-season span. And so I don't think it's the direction that most fans want to go. Let me say that, Shayne. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, this is one of the few hires that they could potentially make that I think would be a legitimate, true downgrade from what they were dealing with Mike Tomlin. Because I think, at least with Tomlin, I can respect his process, and I think he's just a better football coach than Mike McCarthy is. And it would just be the same thing, but different again. And I simply can't do that, because we know Mike McCarthy can take teams to the playoffs. We know that he's able to do that with his time with the Packers and with the Cowboys. But when the moment shines brightest, something happens to him that he just can't get over for some reason. It's something always goes wrong. He makes the wrong decision on offense. He makes the wrong timeout call. He makes the wrong whatever. Like, something happens to him in these playoff games. And he had a more talented roster in Dallas than he's going to have with the Steelers when he gets hired, if he does get hired. I don't even know if he can I don't even know if I could say we can make the playoffs with him as the head coach next year. And if that's not what he's going to do, what's the point of bringing him in? I just don't understand this thought process if this is the direction they ultimately go. And I agree with you. I don't think it is. But the fact that we're hearing so much about it, it just worries me a little bit.
Yeah, there are some who think that this is the number one name on the dock right now. I don't buy it. And we'll talk about these trends here in just a second, but it would go against everything the Steelers have done. And not only that, Shayne, this would, to me, would feel like a desperation. I don't like any of the candidates this year, so let's give Mike McCarthy a 1 or 2 year window and maybe try to run it back again. Like, I don't know what the sense would be here. Are you gonna stick with this coach like you've done with all 3 of your recent coaches that you've had in the Super Bowl era? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go with McCarthy unless you are trying to run everything back again. But even if you try to bring Aaron Rodgers back, I've heard these two don't get along very well. And so that's the other thing.
Yeah. I mean, I keep hearing since this became a thing that, apparently Aaron has walked back his thoughts on him in the past. And maybe there is like a direct connection there where if he comes, then Rodgers will want to come back. But that just makes it twice as much of a thing you shouldn't do if that's the case, because Aaron Rodgers cannot play quarterback for this team next year. I'm sorry about that to anyone who thinks he should. He can't, you can't play offense the way that Aaron plays offense anymore. You cannot do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I don't want to. I have no interest in that. I mean, I've turned the page on that. And so if signing McCarthy means that Rodgers is coming back, double bad move here, I think, on the part of the Steelers. I don't think this happens. And so I want to talk about why, Shayne. Let's talk about those list of candidates for the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they've looked for historically at the position. Three things come in mind, Shayne. Three things.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is, and this is going back to Chuck Nolan. In fact, you can go even before that. You can go one coach before that, before the Super Bowl era, but particularly in the Super Bowl era, these their last three head coaches have had three things in common. The first thing is they've all been young, 34 to 37 years old. Mike Tomlin was 34, Bill Cowher was 34, Chuck Noll was 37. That's young. I mean, that's younger than almost all of the coaches in this coaching cycle right now, outside of like Grant Udinski, who is extraordinarily 30, young. He's 30 years old. Everybody else is older than that. And so they've all had a ton of youth on their side, which gives them the ability to maybe stick around for a long time and not have that message go stale, or not go year to year, kind of like Kevin Colbert did in his last few years with the Steelers. It's like, well, I might hang it up at any time now. So they all had youth. The second thing they all had in common, Shayne, and to no surprise, anybody that's been watching Steelers football in their lifetime, these were all defensive-minded head coaches who brought the tone. Primary focus was the defense, from Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin. They've had those things in common. And so I would be a little bit surprised if they strayed from that. I think that it's possible, but I would still lean towards unlikely there. And the third thing that they all had in common, Shayne, is that they were first-time head coaches. They did not coach anywhere else before that. In fact, all three of them were defensive coordinators right before being snatched up by the Steelers for head coaching positions, but they were never head coaches before. And so because of that, if we're using like a checkbox list, McCarthy doesn't check any of these boxes. Now, I guess we could throw in there, not a one. Now, maybe the Steelers have changed, and Art Rooney too might do business different than his grandfather did in the past. But, and again, McCarthy's had a lot of success, really a lot of wins over the years with Green Bay and with Dallas, the Super Bowl win in Green Bay. We can talk about whether he lucked into Aaron Rodgers. He did, I think, in a sense, Dak Prescott. I mean, can't really give him credit for the development of Dak, but Rodgers, maybe we can. I mean, he's only coached for very good quarterbacks so far. Success is one thing, but he does not check any of these boxes. And so this is the list of what the Steelers look for historically. Shayne, do you think that they will stray from that list at all?
I certainly hope not, because all the best candidates left fit that mold to some degree. So I think that if they do stray from that, unless it's just the defensive element, being an offensive coach instead of a defensive coach, I think that they're probably doing it wrong, frankly. I think they need to stick with the same thing that's worked for them for 60 years, basically, right? Not just because it has worked in the past, but because it's what fits this cycle, right? The first-time head coach, the defensive-minded coach, those are all things that the best coaches left in the cycle have, right? So if it's not one of those guys that fits that mold, I do worry that they might have made a mistake, and that certainly includes McCarthy.
Shayne, let's talk about a minute where Steelers might be going wrong in this head coach search. And so if you look at the list of candidates that the Steelers that are attached to the Steelers right now, Mike McCarthy is obviously one of them. Brian Flores has been since the beginning. Chris Shula, Jesse Minter has been a guy that was on their initial interview list. Who do we have? Anthony Weaver. I mean, a lot of defensive minds. And of that list, Clay Kubiak and Nate Scheelhaase, that were the only offensive minds on the list. And I believe it was like in 6 defense, 2 offense. And the list may have grown since then. But this, I think, Shayne, when we look at this and what's trending in today's NFL, and you hate to follow trends, but sometimes there's a lot of truth to it. 13 of the last 14 coaches who have coached in the Super Bowl have been offensive-minded coaches. In my opinion, Shayne, and you disagree with me if you will, there's only 3 defensive-minded coaches, head coaches in the NFL that I would consider like top 15 head coaches. Mike Vrabel, Mike McDonald, DeMeco Ryans. End of list. I think Sean McDermott would have been number 4, and I'm not even crazy about Sean McDermott, and now he's out of a job. the NFL is telling us what they value right now, kind of like they do in the draft when quarterbacks go high and receivers go high. They're telling us what they value at head coach. It's the offensive mind who can call your offensive plays, because what happens, Shayne, is as soon as you find a Clint Kubiak, like Mike McDonald did, just you get snatched up after 1 year, and that's likely to happen to him. It happened to Kyle Shanahan with Mike McDaniel several years back before he took the Dolphins job. Like, if you have a really good season as an offensive coordinator, you're snatched up for a head coaching position. And to me, it's much harder to find that guy than it is to find a guy that can run your defense and be a tone setter on defense. I think there's a lot more of those out there. Do you disagree with what I just said, Shayne?
I certainly do not. It's just reality, frankly. And I think for people who disagree with the sentiment, I think that, again, it's just, this is, the NFL is telling you this. They've told us this. They've shown us this. The numbers play it out. Like this year, assuming that the Broncos don't find a way to beat the Patriots with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback, and obviously either way when it comes to the well, especially if the Seahawks win then as well in the NFC Championship game, which we'll talk about later, there will be 2 defensive head coaches in the Super Bowl.
There will, yeah.
But guess what? The one is about to lose his offensive coordinator, and the other one only has a good offensive coordinator because Josh McDaniels can't head coach for anything. And he's there as long as he wants to be because no one's going to hire him to be head coach. He's the true, like, kind of guy that is very rare in the sense that he could be very good at his job as an offensive coordinator, but nobody's hiring him to be his head coach because this has been done already and seen that doesn't work. So that, again, this is going to be an exception to the rule over the past, over half decade. And I think the point of that is not that you should never hire a defensive coordinator or a defensive coach to be your head coach. It's that it just puts you at a disadvantage naturally, because if you do hit on an offensive coordinator, like you said, he won't be there long. It just isn't going to happen. And that just puts you in a bind all the time. It's something that Mike Tomlin had issues with, because the only reason his was not getting poached all the time is because they weren't good. So it didn't matter if they it just wasn't working out. So like, it's one of those things where I would like them to have focused more on the offensive side of things, but I knew they wouldn't. So it's almost like, well, what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to get mad about it? Not really. Yeah. But it would be nice to see like Clinton Kubiak's name on this list right now. It would have been nice,
Shayne,
like, but
yeah, I mean, 0% surprised. I'm with you there. I'm not surprised to see when their list unfolded, their initial head coach candidate list. I was not surprised at all to see it heavily dominated with defensive minds, because this is what this franchise does. It's what they've always done. Now, I disagree with the philosophy. I think that at the very least, do your due diligence, bring in more offensive minds, have a 50-50 split, whatever. Not to say that this trend can't flip back, and maybe eventually we'll see it get back to even in the league where there's as many good defensive-minded head coaches as offensive. That is not the case right now. It is heavily, heavily dominated by offensive-minded play callers. And I'll even use a recent example, Shayne. Ben Johnson. This is obviously the highest of the high examples. He's one of my favorite.
This is a very high-end example.
But we would have all considered Dan Quinn an awesome head coach. He was the best sense of a delegator that you could be. The Lions chose to keep Dan Campbell. I said Dan Quinn. The Lions chose to keep Dan Campbell over Ben Johnson. Already looks like a mistake, because Ben Johnson is so good. And he nearly brought the Bears to a championship game in his first year, where the Lions took a massive step back on offense, massive step back. In fact, Dan Campbell had to take over the offensive play calling halfway through the season. It's so hard to find elite offensive play callers that can just manipulate, can play chess on offense while the defense is playing checkers. Like, that is hard to find. And it's why there's so few of these candidates out there. And it seems like there's defensive minds galore. And so I do disagree with that part of the search. Now, I still think that you could get it right. I think the Steelers could find their version of D'Amico Ryans. They could find their version of Mike McDonald. And if you do that, you're sitting pretty. You're going to be in a good situation. But I think the philosophy is a little bit backwards. And I think it's because of their history. They've had so much success with the defensive minds throughout the years that I expected nothing less of Art Rooney II not wanting to change a single thing about that. And that's, again, going back to McCarthy, that's why I would be just floored if McCarthy became the head coach, despite what the odds have to say. And so let's talk about those odds now, Shayne. going down the list here, and this doesn't surprise me because this is kind of the name that I had in mind all along.
Yep.
The top odds for the Steelers' next head coach is Chris Shula of the LA Rams. Defensive coordinator. He's done some good things over there, runs a 3-4 defense, the Rams finished 4th in DVOA, a pretty aggressive, tenacious defense overall. There are better defenses in the league, but I think considering the talent you have to work with, I mean, they got a really good piece over there in Jared Verse and pieces along the defensive line. I think he's done some good things with them. He's seen progress each of the past 2 seasons. In terms of box checkers, he checks them all. He's young, 39 years old. This is the guy at the top of the list with in collective odds here, just from AI that kind of averages out odds from various sports books, have Shula plus 125 to plus 190 to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Shayne. He's followed by Mike McCarthy at plus 150, Brian Flores at plus 300 to plus 400. And then some names that I don't agree with. I wouldn't waste your money on out here if you're a betting person. Sean McDermott, they're not going to go that route, plus 300. And then Jesse Minter, who I really like, but I don't think the Steelers have shown enough interest in, plus 800 odds for Minter. Vance Joseph, plus 850. Don't think that they'll go with the 53-year-old defensive mind there. And then Mike McDaniel, 10-1. They just have shown no interest in McDaniel.
Yeah, Chargers.
So that's just trying to grab your money with that.
Yeah.
So of those names, Shayne, do you agree with the top of the list here in terms of the odds?
Unfortunately, I do think that the odds are right in the sense that it's McCarthy or Shula. I think that at this point, Flores could still sneak in there. I do think that's possible. But I do think it's coming down to, like, do they want to do the thing they've always done? And the thing that at this point in the cycle is probably what they should do. Or are they going to go with McCarthy and just say, well, you know, maybe he can get this offense going. Maybe with the rest of the defense we still have, we can get that going again with the new defensive coordinator, whoever that may be, and we can go on a run again. I certainly hope that they make the right decision there between those two, if it is a 2-man race, and they go with Shula, because I do think, again, he fits all the things that they typically look for. I think he is innovative on defense. I think he brings an attitude and a vision to what he wants to do defensively that is very similar to what the Steelers have tried to do, specifically creating turnovers. That's his mantra. Absolutely. So I think everything just fits too much for him not to end up getting the job here. But the McCarthy of it all just throws a wrench into it a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
Shayne, I agree. I think it is a 2-man race, but my 2 men in the race are Chris Shula and Brian Flores.
I hope so.
And Mike McCarthy.
I hope so.
I don't.
I'd be okay
I'm
with
just
either
not, regardless of the buzz, I am not buying it. I think that there are various reasons for this. Like I said, he's from the Pittsburgh area. He's a well-respected coach with Super Bowl success. He's had connections with the Steelers. He's made it known his love for the Steelers in the Pittsburgh area. I think that this is a due diligence move, and just to say, and maybe if it's one of those things, Shayne, that say, let's bring him in for an interview, and no, we won't roll him out, but we'll kind of see how this old vet coach interviews compared to the young guys and kind of cross compare. I don't think he's a serious option. And so I'm going to say it's a 2-man race, but Chris Shula and Brian Flores. And what would be, and I mean, both of these guys bring the defensive minded presence here. They bring youth. Flores a little bit older. He turns 45 in February. Shula turns 40 this offseason. You're splitting hairs. I mean, it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. Both very aggressive. Flores, #1 blitz rate in the NFL at over 44%. And if you think about it, Shayne, I mean, Flores would do probably wonders for a guy like Nick Herbig. I don't think that you should, this is my philosophy here. I don't think you should ever base your coaching hiring off of a current player or two, or the current makeup of your roster. You should do it with Super Bowl aspirations in mind and saying, down the road, what can I be with this coach? It shouldn't be about how can I fix this here now. Although I do think he runs the most traditional 3-4 defense in terms of the hybrid guys. We saw it with Van Ginkel in Minnesota, and awesome. Just this amoeba blitz defense and stunts and all the stuff that he can do. I think that Herbig and Highsmith, if they kept Highsmith, would be phenomenal in Brian Flores' defense. Having said that, there's lawsuits against the league. There's other stuff that I don't know what the Steelers want to get mixed up in. And the irony
I don't
of this
think they care, honestly. I think they're probably on his side more than anything else.
They might be. But what would make this so ironic is the fact that the Steelers literally had Brian Flores in 2022. They literally could have just said, "We want to make you our defensive coordinator." And then they could have promoted him from defensive coordinator to be in Mike Tomlin's replacement if they decided to go that route. Instead, they kept a very underwhelming Terrell Austin around when every Steelers fan back then in 2020, early in 2023 offseason, was banging the table for them to just make Flores their defensive coordinator. They could have done that. They could have saved some time. Again, it's a moot point because Tomlin wouldn't have gone anywhere during that time anyway, but they would have already had his replacement groomed and ready to go. I just think that it's funny that they chose Austin, who had a horrible track record with Cincinnati and Detroit, over Flores, who did some awesome things in Miami and had a good impact on the Steelers during the brief time that he was here.
Yeah, he'd be a fine candidate too. I think I still would lean, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but I would still be leaning Shula between those two because one, a little younger, not that it's a big deal. I think he comes from a tree that I trust as well with the McVay situation of him being with him since he got the job with the Rams. He's been a part of that organization since day one with him as the head man. I think he'll be able to pull coaches from that tree as well then, which will be a bonus for the offense in particular. It all just makes a lot of sense if that's the case.
And we will talk about that in just a second. We'll give our predictions and talk about what we would do in that situation, what the Steelers should do. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. Also, be sure to check out our written work, steelcurtain.com. We appreciate your support. All right, Shayne, let's predict which candidates will fill all these head coaching vacancies. And so right now, we talked about the four jobs out of 10 that have been filled. Harbaugh to the Giants, Robert Saleh to the Titans, finalizing that deal. Jeff Hafley to the Dolphins, and Kevin Stefanski to the Atlanta Falcons. That leaves 6 job openings remaining. The Steelers are one of them. The Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, Las Vegas Raiders, and the Arizona Cardinals are the last one there on the list. 3 of those 4 AFC North teams, Shayne, looking for new head coaches. We'll see who they ultimately go with here. Which head coach lands in which final job? How do you think that this plays out here? And in my head, and based on everything that we've heard so far, we've kind of seen who each team is visiting with. It really feels like, to me, I'll start over in Baltimore, Shayne. It really feels like Jesse Minter in Baltimore. Do you have the same sense that that's what's happening?
I do have Minter as the guy in Baltimore. It makes too much sense from what they look for as well. He's been in the building. He is Harbaugh adjacent, but more from the McDonald end of things, where he can hopefully bring that type of defense in. And a guy like Zach Orr can either not be there, frankly, because he hasn't really done a great job, or he can take a step back and Minter can run the defense. My only concern for the Ravens, if I was a Ravens fan, is who is his OC, and hopefully his name does not start with a G. That's all I'm going to say about
that. What about Cleveland, Shayne? They've kind of have 2 different schools of thoughts here. They've interviewed older guys and a guy within like Jim Schwartz. They've also brought in Todd Monken and some really young, innovative offensive minds like Nate Scheelhaase and like Grant Udinski. From what I heard, the latest buzz sounds like it could either be Grant Udinski or Jim Schwartz, which is ironic because they couldn't be more different from each other. Schwartz, the longtime NFL veteran, has had some top-ranked defenses. Udinski, the 30-year-old coming from Jacksonville, offensive-minded coach, would be expected to be the play caller there. Do you have a sense of which direction the Browns can go with this?
I do think that it might be Udinski here. And I think it's because if it's not him, they might have to call one of us, Tommy. Like, I don't know who's taking the job other than Jim Schwartz then, right? Like, I think if you're Udinski, I wouldn't take this job at 30 years old because you might kind of get pushed down the pecking order for a while when you inevitably get fired from this organization because it's the Browns. And, I'm not trying to just be biased as a Steelers fan here. Like, we just kind of all know that that's the most likely outcome if that happens. You're working with a situation where you have millions of dollars tied up in a quarterback that nobody wants to see on the field. The quarterbacks you do have are either not talented or can be a little bit talented, but can't really play right now, at least haven't shown the ability to. And you have a really good defense who you hope that Jim Schwartz will be coordinating for you. But how long is that going to last? How long are you going to be able to rely on them while you figure stuff out offensively? But I do think right now the odds are saying Udinski. I wouldn't take the job if I was him, but I won't be surprised if he ultimately is the one who lands the job.
Shayne, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals and who might land here and if it would be a Steelers candidate. I don't think that this is going to interfere with anybody the Steelers have going for them. It looks like the Cardinals have had second interviews with Anthony Campanile, the Jaguars defense coordinator, Vance Joseph, Mike LaFleur has been a name, the Rams offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, Clint Kubiak. Arthur Smith has even had an interview request out there. So don't know how likely that is. But it doesn't look like, at the very least, it doesn't look like that's going to interfere with the Steelers' coaching search. And I think that the Steelers would have precedent over the Cardinals' situation anyway.
I think so. I think if he doesn't get promoted to head coach in Buffalo, I think Joe Brady makes a lot of sense there. Another offensive mind for either maybe sort of Kyler Murray for a minute, or if not him, then whoever the quarterback ultimately is long term. I think that would make a good amount of sense. I think his offense would fit well with that team. Vance Joseph is a sneaky one. He's kind of been the one that I think has been most tied to the Cardinals for a while now, but I would not love that personally.
And then go over to the Las Vegas Raiders. Shayne, Clint Kubiak is the odds-on favorite there, 2-1 odds to be that coach. You can understand why, even though the Raiders have been just a train wreck recently. They've got the number 1 overall pick. They're going to get quarterback Fernando Mendoza. They've got Brock Bowers, who's going to be there for a decade, and Ashton Genty and some young pieces to build the team around at least. And so it's probably going to take some time to get them back there. But it looks like Kubiak, Ejiro Evero, the defense coordinator of the Panthers, is also a candidate over there who's had a second interview.
Yeah, this is going to be Kubiak, in my opinion. I think it makes sense. I think if you looked at this roster outside of quarterback and you know you're going to get one with the first pick in the draft, assuming they do that, which I don't know why they wouldn't at this point. If you look at the roster and just remove the name of the organization from it, you could be like, okay, there's stuff to work with here. It's the Raiders of it all that kind of complicates things. I think a lot of people just assume that they're a train wreck and will always be one, similar to the Browns at this point, which is not great to hear if you're a Raiders fan. But I do think there is a lot of reasons why Kubiak could work there. I think he has the offensive infrastructure there from a talent perspective. If Mendoza ends up being the guy that they want him to be, offensive line needs work, but not having Pete Carroll's son, who apparently didn't know how to coach offensive line, is probably going to be enough to make that unit at least passable in year one with Kubiak. So I do think that that's where he lands ultimately. Yeah.
All right, Shayne. And the final team that we didn't mention here, before we get to the Steelers, is the Buffalo Bills.
Yep.
Should be a really coveted role. Like Josh Allen's going to get you, and that's what we talked about. The ownership and GM Brandon Beane, that combination is so rough right now. The fact that you're willing to throw Keon Coleman under the bus and put all the blame on McDermott, like this is just not professional at all. And maybe that's why it's not getting more traction than it is, because I could probably go coach for Buffalo and Josh Allen would do enough to save my job.
Win 9 games probably.
I mean, he's that good. Yeah. So, but it seems like, ironically, they might go with either the in-house hire or the former OC, Brian Dable or Joe Brady. It might be one of those two guys there. Grant Udinski's also in the running. Lou Anarumo, the Colts defensive coordinator, is also a guy in the mix. And maybe Shayne, maybe a team like the Bills is better going with a defensive mind, because you can just let Josh Allen do his thing on offense and get creative, but you need to play better on defense, and your defense stunk because they had a bunch of old farts like the Steelers did.
Yeah, that's the problem, is like, I get the idea of a defensive head coach being the pick here, like McDermott was for them. However, I do worry that, especially based on this past playoff game, maybe letting Josh Allen just do whatever he wants is not always the best thing to do for him. And I actually think the same thing if they hire Dable. As great as Dable was with Allen early on and getting him up to speed and getting him to where he is an aggressive offensive coordinator. And sometimes when Josh Allen's aggressive, he's aggressive to the point of like, oh no, Josh, what are you doing? Aggressive, right? And I do think that they coached some of that out of him in recent years, despite the playoff game disaster. And I wonder if going too far back in that direction will actually hurt them more than help them. So this is a tough one. I really don't know. I think Dable has a really good shot of being the guy here. But I just don't know if that's going to actually work out if they do.
I mean, I think for what it's worth, Josh Allen, the Bills, had their most successful offensive seasons when Dable was there as the offense coordinator. How he would be as a head coach, I don't know. But that seems to be the path that they're treading here too, is Dable, Joe Brady, something along those lines. We'll see what it ends up coming to be. And that brings us to the Steelers, Shayne. And I want to talk about, let's give our predictions now. We kind of broke this down. We looked at the odds. We gave our thoughts here. Who is your prediction as the Pittsburgh Steelers' next head coach to replace Mike Tomlin?
I think it would be a mild surprise if it's not Chris Shula. I think that's kind of where most people should be at right now if you're just looking at it objectively. Everything fits with him. Defensive mind, younger coach, comes from a respected coaching tree. It all kind of just fits, right? Like it just makes too much sense at this point for it not to happen, which is the only reason why maybe it won't, right? Maybe Rooney will throw a fastball at, or curveball at us, and it'll be McCarthy or it'll be Flores, which would be less of a curveball, but still somewhat of one. Or maybe they all of a sudden bring in Clint Kubiak for an interview or something. I don't know, but unless they do something like that, I do think it will be Chris Shula from the Rams.
All right, Shayne, I am going with Terrell Austin. No.
No.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be Chris Shula. That's kind of been my thought from the beginning of the process. And again, you make a little checklist, and it's not very hard to do, to look at what the Steelers have looked for in the past. Shula is the only one, I would say, that checks these boxes with flying colors.
Yeah.
Flores checks the boxes. I mean, Anthony Weaver checks those boxes. There's guys that do. But we're talking about a guy in his 30s, check. Defensive-minded coach, check. Yep. First-time head coach, check. He's only been a coordinator for a couple of years, and that's like Tomlin was a coordinator for 1 year before he got hired.
Yep.
He's not been – he's been around the Rams for a decade. And maybe my favorite thing about Shula, Shayne, is not his family, the lineage, and the fact that his grandfather was Don Shula and his dad was an NFL coach. I think my favorite thing is that he's been around Sean McVay for nearly a decade.
Right.
And Sean McVay is maybe the best coach in football. And I will take anybody from the Sean McVay or the Kyle Shanahan tree. And so if that's all you're getting out of this is a coach from their tree, you're at least doing something right, because those coaches, not to be a helmet scouter here, Shayne, but those guys have really good track records. They are learning from the best in the business. Sean McVay turns 40 this week, and he already has an extraordinary amount of success in the NFL, Shayne. And so, and he maybe on track, maybe has a chance to win another Super Bowl this year. I will take someone from that tree. So those are our predictions. Chris Shula for Shayne, Chris Shula for me. That is what we believe will happen for the Pittsburgh Steelers for their next head coach. What do you guys think? Leave a comment down below. Do you like how deep we're diving into this? Is this too much for you? Do you want us to stick more to Steelers content? We can get really deep into this. Let us know what you guys think. Share your thoughts. Leave a comment. Like this stream. Subscribe to the Still Curtain podcast. We want to bring you as much coverage as possible. And make sure to check out stillcurtain.com for all of your Steelers news and analysis. All right, Shayne. And I have one more question related to this before we just get to our championship round predictions and close out the show today. Who should the Steelers hire as their next head coach? Because we know we got a really good sense of where the Steelers are going. We do the same thing in the draft. We can really narrow it down. And that's why the Derek Harmon selection was my predicted pick for the Steelers. I predicted the Broderick Jones pick in 2023. Like, you can really get the sense of what this team likes to do. And some of these trends are going to change, obviously, without Mike Tomlin here anymore. Obviously, Kevin Colbert hasn't been here in 3 years now or so. Some trends are going to change, but based on the Steelers' history, based on what we know about the Rooney family, it really feels like Chris Shula. But what would you do, Shayne, if you were making this coaching decision? And obviously, we don't know everything about all of these coaches. We're not going to sit here and pretend that we do. But from a philosophical standpoint, would the Steelers be doing the right thing? Would you also pick Chris Shula, or would you pick somebody else?
I think you and I might also align on this one. I would certainly be hiring Clint Kubiak of the Seattle Seahawks.
Mhm.
That's who I would be hiring if I had the option. Because at some point, when you're an organization that is certainly at a crossroads right now, you have an aging defense, a very expensive one. You are going to have to shed salary off of guys who are going to be retiring and regressing and everything else. That side of the ball, hiring a defensive coach for that will help you rebuild that faster, but it won't save it, in my opinion. I don't think you're going to save this defense as it's currently constructed by hiring an innovative defensive mind, even one like Chris Shula. He can help it last longer, and he can make it easier to find pieces to replace those guys, but he won't save the current version of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not going to be able to do that and actually go on a run with a better offensive mind brought in to be the offensive coordinator or something like that, especially with no quarterback currently in place, give me an offensive play caller who maybe for the first year or two, depending on what the quarterback situation is, doesn't get to run things exactly how he wants, but is in place to, once you do find a quarterback and you do find the weapons and everything else, you can start rolling and actually figure this thing out long term. That would be Kubiak in this cycle. You could argue Udinsky as well. He's even younger, maybe even more kind of well thought of depending on who you talk to, but someone of that ilk, and it would be, in this cycle, that would be Kubiak.
Yeah. I agree, Shayne. Clint Kubiak is my favorite coach of this coaching cycle. He is the one that if I was in charge, I would pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And maybe you guys will come at me later on and say, hey, you were wrong on that. That's all right.
Yeah, it might be.
I mean, to me, again, that offensive mind is so much harder to find. And by the way, if we're cross comparing this, because we kind of like to do this with draft classes too, like where would this guy fall? Kubiak still doesn't hold a candle to Ben Johnson. Like Ben Johnson is my favorite head coach candidate ever. But he's my favorite in this cycle. And that's what we have to work with. And for those who are saying, well, Steelers should have got rid of Tomlin a year sooner, Ben Johnson wouldn't have picked the Steelers.
I don't think so. Because
with all the job security in the world, you got Caleb Williams, you got young skill players. Like that was just a better situation, quite frankly, in Chicago. I also liked Mike Vrabel a lot last year. I don't think Vrabel would have picked the Steelers, even with his Steelers connection. He also had Patriots connection.
So. That's the problem.
And the Patriots had Drake May.
And you saw how that's worked out for him. So he obviously would have been the right choice if it was an option. So,
and Shayne, and that's another argument that I would make here is that if you have your franchise quarterback in place, going back to the Mike Tomlin hire, the Steelers had a franchise quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. They had a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah. You could afford to go with a defensive mind because your offense is already set with that guy.
Should be.
And regardless of who you bring in at coordinator, you know that you've got a good quarterback. The Steelers don't know that. And we might not know that for a long time. And this is what's concerning is if you don't go with the offensive mind, you might be stuck down in the pit on offense for a long time. And we've already been there for 7 or 8 years. And the last few years of Ben Roethlisberger, we've been there. I think the Steelers should go with Clint Kubiak, a guy that they've shown zero interest in so far. A little bit of interest in his brother Clay, which I'd be a little less inclined to, although he does come from the Kyle Shanahan tree, and I do like that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
no play calling experience. He that's not true. He does call plays on occasion for Shanahan,
which is, by the way,
not a full-time play caller.
Shanahan's just doing that so he doesn't have to give him up as an OC if he gets hired somewhere else. That's why, because he could, because a team wouldn't have to get permission if they elevate him to a play calling role opposed to his current OC role. I know what Shanahan's doing. He can't fool me. He doesn't want to lose him.
Yeah.
So he's just saying it. Even if he does, he's just saying it out loud so people know, like, hey, you can't take him just because you're gonna have to hire him as head coach if you want to take him.
Yeah. Those lateral moves. He's got blocking power there. Yeah. I mean, again, Clay, I wouldn't be opposed to rolling the dice on Clay. I think the philosophy is right.
Yeah.
But what I would say, Shayne, is going back to our original conversation, it's so hard to find a really good offensive mind. I believe that Kubiak is that guy. We saw extraordinary flashes during his brief time with the Saints. And then this year with the Seahawks, tremendously efficient offense, a wonderful year by Sam Darnold. Again, the rushing attack was on point. Like,
that's the thing too for Steelers fans. Yeah. If you're someone watching this and you have questions about, an offensive mind in general, as much as the passing game with Kubiak, I think, is good, his running game work is where he shines. That's actually where I think he does his best work. And if you're a Steelers fan, that should excite you because he's going to want to run the football, and Steelers have always wanted to run the football. He'll fit. I think he would fit. I don't think it would be this huge departure from a philosophy standpoint overall outside of that. Like, I do think you could play the brand of football in the AFC North that you need to play with him as your offensive mind. So just throwing that out.
Yeah.
There. So
no, absolutely. And I agree with you on that sentiment there. Kubiak would be my top choice. The others that I would consider still over Shula. And again, I like Shula. I do. I like him quite a bit. The problem is I just think that offensive mind is harder to find. And so I would take Clint Kubiak, and then I would consider Nate Scheelhaase over him. I would consider, again, this might not be a popular pick with Steelers fans, but I like Mike McDaniel. I think as an offensive play caller, he's brilliant still. He's just really quirky, and he's got a shtick to him.
That's the thing is, I think my problem with the Mike McDaniel of it all with the Steelers, because I actually talked to some people about this last night, it's not anything to do with football. I just can't picture that man coaching this team. I simply can't. And that is not a slight to him whatsoever.
Fun, though.
It would be really fun, but I physically can't picture it in my head. Like, it feels impossible to imagine. So, like, you take that however you will, but he would certainly be in there, like you said. Like, Scheelhaase, I think, because he doesn't have NFL play calling experience at all, and he's still kind of newer to the McVay tree, I do think maybe he needs some more time, which is why hopefully maybe if they hire Shula, he'll be the OC for us. But as far as being a head coach, I think he could use some more time. And even I'll throw Udinski's name in there. I know we talked about him for the Browns.
I was going to do,
I mean, the stuff that has been said about him by like Kevin O'Connell in particular, it makes you think like maybe a team should just go ahead and take the dive on him and see what happens, which maybe will happen. So.
All right, those are our thoughts on the head coaching position. Shane and I both think that it will be Chris Shula if we had to guess right now. Although we might go in a slightly different direction. We like Shula. We'll see if that ends up being the case. If the Steelers, I will say this, Shane, if the Steelers hire Chris Shula, it's really important to get that OC right. You've got to get an OC. You cannot have an Arthur Smith level coordinator. You can't mess that up, because the Steelers will still really struggle to move the ball, because that's not Shula's side of the ball. That's not where he thrives there. And so I would hope, and my hope, Shane, is that being around an aggressive passing game, an aggressive coach in Sean McVay, that he's going to want to bring the same aggressiveness to the offense if he comes to Pittsburgh. So I've got a lot of optimism there if that were to be the case. All right, from the highs, the heartbreaks, every headline, this is the Still Curtain Podcast, your source for Steelers talk, powered by stillcurtain.com and the voices at Fansided. We are dropping articles every single day. Go check them out, stillcurtain.com. All right, Shane, let's give our predictions for the championship round before we head out here. And maybe, Shane, maybe by next week, maybe there'll be some news on the Steelers front for the head coaching job. If not, a few updates, but we'll find out what happens. And one more note here on Chris Shula, Shane, before we make these predictions. If the Rams win this week, now all these coaching candidates are able to be interviewed in person by Monday. Okay.
Yeah. No matter what.
From all four teams that are in these championship games. But if the Rams win, that's 2 more weeks that Chris Shula is devoted and solely focused on trying to go out and win a Super Bowl, which is awesome. And it increases his resume and only makes it better.
Yeah.
But it's 2 more weeks. It delays the process potentially for the Steelers, unless they make the hiring in between that time where the Super Bowl takes place. And I don't know if Shula is going to want to make that decision, or maybe he already knows. But he's going to, after the Super Bowl, things start happening really fast. The Splash Ryan, the Senior Bowl, everything, the free agency is right around the corner. He's going to have to hire his coaching staff. So just something to consider if the Steelers are focused in on that route. And I think that these conversations have taken place already. I think that is where my guess would be. All right, let's move on. Championship predictions. Here we go. Shane, let's start with the NFC, a little less relevant to the Steelers here. And we got a awesome game.
Yeah.
The 2 best teams in the league by far in terms of DVOA, the 2 best teams in the league in general. One of these teams had to finish as not the top seed because they were in the same division. And so the Seattle Seahawks, the LA Rams should be a tight game, should be a fun one. The Bears and Rams gave us a awesome show this past week. What do you think ends up happening? Are the Seahawks, the number 1 seed, going to cruise into the Super Bowl, or is it going to be Sean McVay's Rams?
Part of me wants to root for the Matthew Stafford of it all and McVay and just how good he's been and how good they've been. But this Seattle team, they're just so hard to beat right now, defensively in particular. And frankly, the Rams offense has just kind of been meh for a little while now. And, maybe they can turn it on in this game and they can figure it out, and McDonald won't be able to find answers for what McVay's doing. But I think right now the edge you have to give to Seattle. If their defense plays like it has so far for really the whole year, and especially in the playoffs, I just don't know if the Rams offense can do enough to keep at least Sam Darnold from putting up enough points to beat them, right? I don't think Darnold didn't have to do a whole lot against the Niners because the Niners scored 6 points. They still scored 41 points. It's still a pretty good day at the office. If he just only has to do a little bit and the running game with Kenneth Walker can take over and all that good stuff, I just don't know if the Rams can pull it out. So I would take Seattle.
Yeah, interestingly, Shayne, the Seahawks are only 2.5-point home favorites in the NFC Championship game. So theoretically, if this were on a neutral field, they might be slight underdogs or pick
the
them in this game to the Rams. Sam Darnold's dealing with the oblique injury. Zach Charbonnet has torn ACLs out for the season.
Yeah.
Regardless, I'm with you. I'm taking the Seattle Seahawks, the best team collectively on both sides of the football this year. Number 1 in DVOA. They crushed their schedule. They were awesome. I really like Mike Macdonald. And again, if Chris Shula can be Mike Macdonald, sign me up for that, because you talk about bringing that defensive presence while also hiring a great coaching staff around him, like he did with Clint Kubiak, though Kubiak's going to get poached here soon. Give me the Seahawks. Give me the Seahawks in the NFC. The AFC, Shayne, I got to admit, selfishly, I was really hoping for a Patriots-Bills matchup.
Yeah.
I wanted to see Josh Allen against Drake May. I thought that would have made for a really fun game. Instead, we get Josh Allen versus Jarrett Stidham in this game. Not even Bo Nix. Regardless, there's a chance the Broncos could pull this off still. They're 5.5-point home underdogs, which is not ideal. You hope, the hope is that you don't have to throw the ball all that much. And it's like, what do you do in this situation? It's unfortunate to lose your quarterback in such a pivotal game right here. Who do you have advancing to the Super Bowl, Broncos or Patriots?
So honestly, the quarterback situation for the Broncos does make it easier, but I would have comfortably taken the Patriots regardless, because I do think there's a downgrade, obviously, from Nix to Stidham, but I don't think it's that much of a downgrade, frankly, in the grand scheme of things. Not when you're talking about against this Patriots defense, the way that they've played in the playoffs. I just don't know if they can do enough offensively to keep the Patriots at bay, because this is not the Texans defense. As good as the Broncos defense is, what the Texans defense was doing to the Patriots before CJ Stroud basically just threw the game away for the second time, except this time the other team obliged, unlike the Steelers did. Mm-hmm. They are just so good, and the Patriots still managed to do enough offensively to win that game. I don't think Denver can do the same thing. I just don't think they have the horses the same way the Texans do. And I think the Patriots will be able to exploit enough of what's going on defensively with the Broncos to put up the 20 or so points they probably have to put up to win the game easily. So I will take the Patriots comfortably.
Yeah, give me the Patriots as well. Shayne, I think for the Broncos to win this game, it's going to have to be in Mike Tomlin's Steelers fashion, which is you're going to have to get takeaways. And for what it's worth, Drake May's been putting that ball on the ground too much. And so it's definitely possible. Yeah. You collect a few of those fumbles. He's fumbled more than any quarterback in the NFL this season. The postseason, he has not been clean in terms of the turnover department. And so there is a chance if Broncos, I would say, are +2 or better in takeaways, they'll have a real shot at this game. Yeah. If not, I agree with you. Patriots are going to run away with it. They just have the far better quarterback situation. And Drake May is a top 2 MVP candidate this year. Give me the Patriots in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. Shayne, do you want to go ahead and make an early Super Bowl prediction right now and see if this comes true?
We can, because then we'll get a chance to do our actual one when we'll
do another one.
Results. But here's what I'm saying: take Seattle no matter what.
Yeah,
it does. If Seattle makes it, take it. Also, probably if the Rams make it, probably take them too.
I would agree 100%.
I think the NFC has it. That's what I'll say.
I'm taking the team that comes out of the NFC, whether it's the Seahawks or the Rams. I think that's the best bet. Those are, again, like I said, I think they're the 2 best teams in the league, and so I would take them over whatever the AFC has to offer this year. All right. The Still Curtain podcast premieres every Wednesday evening at 5 p.m. You can also check out Josh Yorish and Mark Powell's show premiering on Mondays. Thank you all for joining the show today. You can follow Shayne on X at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.